Football?
Yeah, football.
Football?
Round ball. Yeah.
Who's Paris? Who?
Come on.
The French don't play football, do they?
No, we've just won 2 World Cups, but okay. Welcome to the Media Odyssey Podcast. This is Shapiro.
And that is Marion Ranchet.
This week on the pod, we're doing a spring wrap-up.
Spring cleaning.
Yeah, let's say that. We have a lot to cover, and there's a lot of cleanup to do in the media and entertainment industry this week.
We each brought 2 topics to cover from this past spring that we think deserve a second and a current look. Mine are the recent Upfront and what's happening now, and the recent spate of layoffs in big media.
So we've had layoff on this side of the ocean too, namely at ITV. So we'll be talking about that, but I'm also coming with a strategy and a management lesson from football and the fact that Paris Saint-Germain won. PSG is Paris Saint-Germain. That's
Right.
the team from Paris. They won on Saturday.
The Champions League.
Yes.
Right. And that's important.
That is very important. This is very
Why?
important. So this is football. It's an amazing sport, much more interesting than your own football. Anyway, this is done. Tick. No.
And much
so
more popular than American football, strangely, even though
well,
the most
it is.
financially successful league in the world is the NFL.
Yeah.
Football is watched by billions of viewers
Yeah. It's a
worldwide.
global sports, right?
Correct.
So I think American football, super nice, but it's not truly a global sport.
Got it. And so the
What's
Champion League championship
yeah,
was recently, and your team, whose name is,
Paris Saint-Germain.
won
Paris est magique.
won the championship?
We did. So it's a club championship, right? So for the last few months, you've had teams, so Paris, Liverpool, Arsenal, Munich, you name it, right? So European teams, slowly but surely going up at the top. And at the end, you had Paris Saint-Germain and Inter de Milan. I'm saying it in French, so Milan,
Yeah.
Inter Milan. I don't know. And so we won 5-0. That's great. The story behind this for me, right, for this pod, because there's more than football. One, it's a management
Ball is life.
lesson.
Go ahead.
It's a
Sorry.
management lesson. Let me
Yeah.
explain why. So
Yeah.
we've never won. We were in a final a few years ago. The team is backed by the Qatari. So they've poured a lot of money into that team.
That's not a good
Uh,
story.
Of course, they wanted that team to win for years.
Yeah, right.
They invested in trying to have. We had Messi. We've had tons of amazing player, Mbappe, etc. We
You
never
had
won.
Messi and you didn't win the championship?
Exactly.
Holy cow.
So this team is not a team of superstars. It's just a great team with a great coach.
Right.
And they won the year what they had no superstars. So Mbappe just left. He was frustrated. He wanted to go to Real Madrid to win with Real Madrid. And the year he does that, PSG wins without him. So that's a management lesson. Is
Yeah, it was
that
a
you
real
need to
shift
have
in
superstars.
philosophy from a star-driven team to much more of a
Exactly.
team, much more of, the original Warriors, very much, in keeping with a lot of the Detroit, although there were superstars on each one of these teams. And
Yeah.
by the way, the Pacers here at NBA, I know your family's into the NBA, the
Yeah.
Pacers have never won a championship, and they're a very small market team, and they're
Yeah.
about to go to the
And
championship. Anyway, go
OKC,
ahead.
right? The same, huh? OKC this year,
Yeah.
they've had an amazing season. There's not one big star. It's just, amazing teams together. So that's kind of my lesson. No, the other lesson that is interesting is so the year we win, we lose our main broadcaster, meaning that on the French market, the Zone, who bought the rights for this season
To
and
the
the next few
team's
seasons.
television rights? The
Yeah.
team's television rights? Okay, got it.
And so at the end of this season, we don't have a broadcaster. So
So
the
prior to
Zone,
this current time, Canal Plus was the traditional broadcaster of the team?
historically, then beIN, then Prime
Then
dabbled,
beIN, got it.
and then you had Media Pro, and then after a season, it went under. And so this is history repeating. It's a new market entrant who's buying the rights, and they're not making it. So we spoke about this a few months back on the podcast. Fans felt it was too expensive. Piracy grew like this. Anyway, the lesson here is there's no way they're going to launch a channel or an OTT product in 3 months. The season starts in August. So big question mark on to what's going to
They
happen. But
just
so
finished. The new season starts in August. They just won the championship a couple
yeah,
days
they
ago.
well, so that's a different tournament. But the league just the League One
The leagues they
season
normally
regular.
play in, but the Champions
Yeah.
League, they was still the same team playing, right?
Well, believe it or not, in July on the zone you have the World Cup for clubs. So anyway, these guys are working around the
Well,
clock.
so
But
let me ask you a question there, because that's an excellent point. So the club season,
yeah,
that's the television rights that you're talking about,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
And who's the company that overbid for them and then failed?
So what happened is that initially no one bid last year. No one. Canal Plus is mad. They didn't want to bid. And then Amazon and others didn't want to, do it again. And
Mhm.
so the zone went in, bought the rights for, decent money, but not as crazy
But
as
they
a
reneged
previous.
on those rights, didn't they? They're pulling back. They're no
And
longer
now they're
broadcasting.
pulling back.
But
Now
I
they're
but
saying it's too expensive.
from what I understand, what they are offering is a bespoke service operationally speaking, behind the scenes for the club. So they'll be able to use the DAZN, that's hard to say. They're going to be able to use the DAZN's platform. And so I think there's a potentially less disruptive opportunity there
Yeah.
for them. And I think that rather than litigate, both sides decided to compromise on this,
Yeah.
where it seems like DAZN is offering the services basically for free to compensate for breaking the contract.
Yeah.
And the club would be able to launch if they so choose. The problem, I think, to your point though, is they've pissed off everyone so badly in the market. Nobody wants to work with them. Oh, sorry, I was going to make one larger point, which is
Yeah.
because of the Champions League and the World Cup of clubs, there's so many opportunities for the fans to see the team everywhere else than through what might be the normal club season,
The
right?
normal season. Yeah, I think yeah, and I think that's right. But what's interesting is that it's a good example of, legacy broadcasters, whether that's free or paid, leaving, the market, the streamers taking a stab at it, but ultimately not that easy to break in a new market with a brand that is not known, right, by the local population. The price point was honestly around 30 or 40 euros. It's a lot
Yeah.
of money, but why are they doing that? Is because that's their way of saying that's when we can make money or break even. So it also speaks to the sports rights and the fact that it's just going up, 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 and there's a moment
Well,
where
yeah,
it starts to
there's not
tangle.
a lot of logic around some of the prices, and I think
Exactly.
everybody said, "Don't sign this deal originally to them because it's not realistic. It's not gonna
Yeah.
work out." But it does it to your point of getting into these new markets with a new name, is difficult. I think it's much harder than everybody seems to be
Yeah.
realizing, and that segs to one of my things from this past spring, which is, the layoffs, throughout the ecosystem and what they represent. And so just this past week, despite having terrific, results in first quarter,
Yeah.
Disney announced the largest layoff of the Iger Redux era,
Yeah.
right?
How many
Uh,
people are we talking about?
I don't think we got a total number, but behind the
Sure.
scenes, they keep hinting that it's the largest one. So that means I think it's four figures of humans being let go.
Whoa.
And then first, Disco Brothers, aka Warner Brothers Discovery, floated the idea that they were going to do yet another round of
Yeah.
layoffs. And then this week, the shareholders of Warner Brothers Discovery, aka Disco Bros, finally revolted and voted against Zaslav's $50 million
Yeah.
plus
Paycheck.
pay
Mm.
package. And then the day after that gets announced, they announce the actual layoffs.
Yeah.
Um, and then on top of that, you've got NBC, Universal, Cabletown, Comcast, laying off a bunch of people prior to spinning out Versant. And,
This
in
name.
each one of these cases, you can see the lack of strategy leading to the layoffs. However, I would argue that Disney, of all of those three,
Yeah.
I understand it's painful to be laid off, and I write about this and we talk about this a lot. But at least it seems like Iger seems to be the only adult in the room. I'm
Mm.
not going to reorg on paper to satisfy Wall Street. I'm not going to spin this very profitable enterprise out right now. I'm going to downsize it, as I promised you I would, while I'm making our streaming business incredibly profitable. Now
Yeah.
they're haven't not generating huge profits yet, but they're on their pathway. They have the lowest churn in streaming when you bundle those three services together. They are better at that than I think even Netflix. And so I think that's an adult, solution to the problem of a broken model. Whereas Disco Bros, aka Warner Brothers Discovery, has lost that just the whole merger was so wrong-headed, and the entire strategy since has only been cut, 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 cut,
Yeah.
cut, which improves your overhead, but it really hurts your ability to generate revenue, as his earnings calls have demonstrated quarter after
Mm.
quarter after quarter. And NBC Universal, I have friends who are going through this there, and there's gonna be opportunities and downsides for
Yeah.
everybody across that entire continuum, but people have lost their jobs, and what is the strategy? What
Yeah.
is it? So
Yeah. I think.
that to me, the layoffs are only a symptom, unfortunately, a human-based symptom for just the larger brain rot that we see in a lot of our traditional media. And it goes back to your point of they've had a really hard time transferring very successful, very profitable
Yeah.
businesses into this new era.
Yeah. So, pretty much at the same time, we've had the layoff announced by ITV. Uh, and I will say, I will put them in the Disney camp in the
Right,
way they communicated around those layoffs. So, the portion of staff who's going to be impacted is mainly folks working on the morning segments.
right. The
And
daytime.
ITV said it's not a question of performance because that was kind of my first thing. Okay, linear TV, is struggling. Perhaps not enough people watching.
Right,
The economics don't work out. They said that's not the reason why. And I think there's still a lot of demand. We're talking a million people watching, I think, every morning. So it's still, sizable people watching those shows in the morning. It is also very much part of the culture. And so there's the topic of
right.
it's nice to slice, but
It's
you need
it's
to
kind
also.
of I mean, it's not dissimilar to Good Morning America and The Today Show and
Yeah,
things like that,
exactly. Well, I think one of the
but
shows
there's
is Good Morning Britain.
right,
So yeah,
exactly.
there you go. You have it. But so they said it's not a question of performance. It's more a question of focus, and it's a question of trying to optimize. So they want to do pretty much the same thing with less people. So some shows will be shorter, but the programming stays. And guess what? They want some of that money to be reinvested in different areas of the broadcaster. And so they mention a couple of scripted shows that were proven successful, like Mr. Bates and the Post Office. We're talking one of their biggest shows with over
The
10
biggest
million
show of
people.
last year, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So I get it. And this goes back to what we did when we were in London, the fact that, it's going to be the same amount of money,
Right.
or
Gonna go
maybe
to
a
new
bit
places.
less,
That's exactly
but
right.
you're going to put it somewhere else. Exactly. And so I will say that to me, it's not just blind cuts, but yeah,
They're
let's see.
they're cutting back on the areas that they know have a point of diminishing return, which is a
Yeah.
live show on broadcast telly, right? The audience is aging there, and
Yeah.
the people are not necessarily gonna tune in on the appointed hour, especially in younger generations,
Yeah.
and so they wanna move resources to and specifically, as I read it, the digital areas of the
Yeah.
business, which is really working for them right now. If you talk to anybody there, Ruth and Martin Trickey, who we're gonna see, at Stream TV, next week, those investments are paying off. Also, to your point, read what's actually being said.
Yeah.
They very much said, "Look, we're gonna cut back on the amount of content
Yeah.
we make." So, the equivalent of around 40% less content in
Mm.
that time block. And whether that's more vacations and
Yeah.
hiatuses or fewer hours, think about the Today Show here. I think it's 17 and a half hours long. I mean, it's
Yeah.
the longest show. It just goes on and on and on. So they're cutting back too because they have
Yeah.
to trim. So these traditional formats that generated billions of dollars are no longer working the same way. We're going to
Yeah.
reallocate our resources into new areas. It makes a lot of sense. And the way that both of those companies, Disney and ITV, handled it was super adult. You then compare that to Comcast, Cabletown, NBC Universal, and Disco Brothers, aka Warner Brothers Discovery, and they just look like friggin' morons by
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
comparison.
How about Walmart, who announced, was it yesterday or today, over 1,000 cuts
I
across
did not see that.
stores, advertising? I was actually surprised,
That's it.
to be
Especially
honest,
because
because we're all saying retail media is the next big thing, etc. So, you didn't see that news?
I did
I
not.
think it just came out.
I did not see that. And yeah, no, I mean, I guess, and I was just redoing my map. And by the way, a major revision, like a completely
Yeah.
revamping. I'll break some news here. I'm actually adding the public service broadcasters to the map. Again, they've been on, they've been off, but it's hard to include everybody. So I
Yeah.
created it. Tell me what you think about this. I'm sizing them by 2024 revenue,
Yeah.
just them, and it's denoted that way. And I'm cutting it off at $1 billion. You have to earn at least $1 billion in revenue to make the map. Otherwise, it's hundreds and hundreds of
Yeah, yeah,
public
it's gonna
broadcasters
be
that
too
I'd have
many
to have.
folks. Yeah, that makes sense. Uh, you're taking them as a whole, right? So not just the TV business, but also
Yeah.
the studio business.
Total revenue,
Yeah.
commercial and governmental. And so PBS, um, which has almost no governmental revenue, to be
Yeah.
honest with you,
Anymore. Mm.
CBC, BBC, ZDF, RAI, French Television, all the notable ABC from
Mm.
Australia. Again, the cutoff, I just arbitrarily had to decide on a cutoff.
Yeah,
And
yeah, for
so it
sure.
was, because it's very surprising how little money the public service broadcaster in Mexico generates.
Mm.
I'd
But
love
I
to
was
include them, but it would be
yeah.
this.
But yet, they're gonna look tiny, because your map is a lot about, big, big guys.
Yeah, but I mean, they hold their own against the RTLs
Yeah,
and some of the other M6, Vivendi, those types of folks. This small by Bertelsmann standards,
yeah,
but they'll be notable, and I put a nice halo around them to because they're doing God's work. So that leads us to my last wrap up item from the spring, which is the upfront.
yeah.
And so the upfront, I think many people think it starts at CES,
Mm.
and it culminated as a season in mid-May, with all the presentations. And not everybody presented. You mentioned Roku did not present. Now we're in this weird tweener sphere between the upfronts and Cannes Lion, where the deals are supposed to be being made. Now, we should note we're both going to be at Cannes. We're doing some cool stuff there. We're recording 3 episodes of our podcast, including with Amelia de Moldenberg, whose name is difficult to say. I should speak. My name is Shapiro, about her show, this massive YouTube hit, Chicken Shop Date. And we'll be interviewing Dar Mann, who is really super fascinating. He runs one of the only massively successful scripted studios in the creator economy. But we're in this weird area around the upfront where the deals are supposed to be being made, and they're not necessarily being made. There's a lot of foot dragging going on, and it was going to be a down year in the upfront, I think, anyway, and I predicted that early on. But on the other side of it, there's all this uncertainty. If there's one
Mm.
catchphrase, everybody used the phrase full funnel. Everybody used creator economy during their
Yeah,
presentations. Everybody had the same buzzwords. But if there's one buzzword about this period, where we're supposed to be making deals and deals are not necessarily being made, it's anxiety,
yeah,
it's uncertainty. And what I think that's going to result in is a much more heavy scatter set of budgets this year.
yeah.
And less big, chunky deal making because who knows what's going to happen in the world. I don't know if you're seeing that level of uncertainty creep into the business operations of the people you work with in Europe.
Yeah, and I will say it's beyond advertising. I was talking to someone from my network, and he was saying that he's seeing a lot of RFPs of people who want to change providers. In the end, they don't change, or people are, shutting down services because the monetization is not there. That applies a lot to fast channels. Or essentially, they want the same quality of service cheaper. There's a lot of that going on. There's
Yeah.
company, folding as well. So no, we're seeing a similar trend, and everyone is like, it's been rough, and it's gonna be known as a rough year.
And I think it's driven not by necessarily the economic um, levers themselves, but more the unknown. We have a lot of things happening in
Yeah,
Washington, D.C. that is
yeah,
confusing the planet Earth. And as a result, the markets, all of them, are gyrating interestingly.
yeah,
And so, if you know that taco is a thing, do you bet on that?
yeah,
And, how do you bet on that? And then, doesn't it become a self-fulfilling prophecy that, well, it'll swing back the other way? Anyway, it's really hampering the ability to move forward in a lot of businesses right now. So, my advice right now, if you find yourself or your company in a period where you're uncertain about what to do, um, the thing that I have found useful is to have a conversation with all the major stakeholders and listen to the things that are making them most anxious and try
yeah,
to build consensus around the facts and not the feelings.
yeah.
So much of what's happening right now is driven by emotional reactions to actions as opposed to the real data itself.
I have to say that at the end of last year, I lost one of my clients exactly for that, because
Yeah.
advertising was soft, and they were a sure thing for this year. In the end, they were gone. And I did not freak out. And what I did, and I advise people to do that. And I know sometimes it's difficult in corporate because you feel like you don't control anything, but it's
Right.
just to take one day at a time. And one thing that we really talk a lot about, that is diversification, right? And if you look at the year that I'm having, I'm trying to future proof my business and not rely overly on, consulting and services, because again, by ricochet, I'm hurt by what's happening in corporate. I'm sure to some extent you are too, right? And so that's where it's important for me to now have a bit more of a product suite of revenues coming my way, right? Something, yeah, less, that is, stronger in the face of all of that
Yeah.
uncertainty, the anxiety that people can feel, that can make them decide either to not just, work with me, or keep me on, etc., invest. So yeah, one day at a time, and diversification.
Yeah, we did talk about this at the beginning of the year, and we both diversified our businesses despite indications that the market was going to be uncertain. We
Yeah,
launched this podcast, Integrate Uncertainty. You and I each have launched other initiatives and kind of changed our product lineup, and it's worked out
yeah,
really well. And that's a data point that I've seen over the years, which is companies who actually invest in themselves in uncertain times usually make it out the other side stronger than their competition who don't. And for that reason, I'm really glad to be on this journey with you,
yeah,
this
yeah.
podcast and a joint venture as well.
Yeah, I love it too. And you know what? I launched in 2022, right in the midst of still
Yeah.
the pandemic, and people were saying, "Marion, you should stay, you know, tight in whatever company I was at the time. Uh, there's no way you should, start a business now. It makes no sense." See?
There you go.
And
You
I'm more
bet on
prepared
yourself.
now that
Yeah.
if I had to do it this year, right? So which is why I feel really bad for all the layoffs coming up.
Yeah.
Uh, it's gonna be rough. It's gonna be rough in the next few
Well,
months.
and just on a parting shot, on my newsletter, Media War and Peace, you will find a ton of resources. I've written a number of times
I love
about
that.
this, places to look for jobs, ways to prepare yourself for what's coming or what has happened. And please check those out. And your newsletter is?
Streaming Made Easy on Substack. I don't talk as much about that, but I do that a lot on LinkedIn. And I think perhaps we can say that we're living proof that it's possible to, overcome challenging times and come out stronger.
We're at Stream TV this week, but next week we will be at Cannes Lion all over the place doing lots of cool shit. So check us out. Hit us up on LinkedIn if you want to get together for a glass of rosé or a piece of
Stop
pizza.
us in the streets, stop
Yeah,
us on
right.
the project. Take me places. I'm worried about this
No,
event.
I'll
I've
take you.
never been.
No, it'll be
I
fun.
feel like I'm going to be lost with Mad Men. I don't know what to make of
No,
this.
it's a lot of fun. All your friends are there.
Okay. Okay, cool.